Welcome to the Velocity Tuning channel. Today's video is going to be all about Draggy, how it works, what the leaderboard is, how to get the fastest times, and why you're using Draggy when you've already got your dyno printouts. We're going to be discussing how to get the best runs and what the difference is between the different Draggy units that have been released over the years. So what is Draggy and what does it do? It is a small GPS device that connects to your phone, and if you're on a track day, it'll record your laps for you. If you want to record 0 to 60, quarter mile or 100 to 200 kilometers, it's going to record all that data for you, showing you how fast your car or bike is accelerating. Now, why is that important? Well, one of the main reasons it's important is because different dynos can read power differently, and like the guys in America, they quote much higher wheel horsepower figures than we do in the UK. But if you look at the Draggy times, they're similar. So that shows us that if you're basing things just off the dyno numbers alone, you may end up with a car that you think is slow, when actually it is running exactly the same times as a car in another country. Draggy has been out for quite a few years now, and as such, they've done 4 different units. Yes, I am the sort of person that likes to buy them and test them and see what the differences are. So originally they had the Drg 69, then they came out with the Drg 70, which had better GPS. Then they done the Drg 70C, which was USB-C plug for charging. And finally, they've came out with this latest one, which is the Draggy Pro. In all honesty, the first 3 units are nearly identical to each other. All their features are pretty much the same. But this latest one has got better battery life. I believe that the antenna is better on it, and it can also save to the actual device itself instead of you having to rely on the phone, which means if you get the phone disconnected halfway through a pool, it don't matter because you've got all your runs saved directly to this unit. I quite like this one, but to be honest with you, if you're just interested in recording times, they all do the same job. What's the Draggy leaderboard? It is part of the app where you can put your times. So if you go and run a fast 100 to 200, you can post it up online and other people can see exactly what you've done. It's also really handy if you're thinking about putting a certain turbo on or maybe doing flex fuel. You can have a look through. What I like to do is maybe pick 5 different accounts, 5 different people that have run times, and sort of take an average from it to work out what sort of times I can be expecting from my own car. If someone calls you up and they've got a C63 or they've got an RS3 and you're thinking, what's that car accelerate compared to mine? Then you can have a look on the leaderboard and see what the average RS3 times are. It is a really good way to work out what sort of different speeds and accelerations different cars have got. And the best bit, you don't even need to own a Draggy to check it out. You can just download the app and check that out. Quarter miles, 0 to 60s, 100 to 200s, it's all there for you to check out on loads of different cars, and people can even list the modifications that they've done to their car. What else can make a difference other than dyno numbers and different manufacturers of those machines? Well, actually what the vehicle is that's making the power as well. As such, if you've got a G80 and you've got an X3M, with them having the identical power, the G80 is going to be a lot faster than the X3M. It's got better aerodynamics and it's slightly lighter also. So there's just one case of where you can have 2 different cars which accelerate completely differently. But a real extreme version of cars that actually run the same, or vehicles that run the same, would be this car and this bike. They're both running a 3.7 100 to 200 kilometer, but this is 1100 brake, this is 200 brake. Now, if I just turned around to you and I said, okay, a car with 1100 brake versus a bike with 200 brake, which one do you think would be faster? It's going to be quite hard to work it out. And that same logic can be applied to like a small front wheel drive hatchback or a big people carrier that is 4x4. When you've just got the power to base things off, it can be hard to work out in a real race which is actually going to be faster, and the dyno is not going to help with that, but the Draggy will. You can see exactly how fast each car is doing its 0 to 60, 100 to 200, etc, etc. And as such, this car was 8 seconds when it was 500 brake from factory, and like I said, we've now got it down into the threes by doubling the power of it. And if I turned around and told you that this car was 1100 brakes, but it was doing a 6 or 7 second 100 to 200, it wouldn't be as impressive. So for me, I actually care more about the Draggy numbers than I do the dyno numbers, because I find it more relative and easier to understand. If you want to claim higher or lower numbers, it's going to make it difficult for me to compare that to maybe my own dyno. But if you tell me that a car is accelerating in 4 seconds, 100 to 200, I know exactly how fast that car is going to be in the real world. I'm going to give you all my tips and tricks on how I get my best 100 to 200 runs on the Draggy, but before I get into all that, I actually want to talk about what affects a run and how the times can actually be different depending on the conditions at which you take the car out in. So when I tell you that this does a 3.7, that is the best run that I can do in it. If it was able to do a 3.4 on a freezing cold night, then I'm going to tell you it can do a 3.4. If during the summer it's doing a 3.9 or a 4.0, that's not the number that I'm going to be telling you about, because if I tell you a car does 4 seconds and then you take it out on a cold night and it's running a 3.7, it's actually faster than I told you. But on the flip side, depending on what time of the year you get your car mapped, you may find that those numbers differ. So what actually affects the runs and what are the sort of things you want to be looking at when deciding whether you want to try to do some runs or not? First one and biggest one is temperature. When it comes to making power, the colder the air is, the more oxygen is in the same space and the more power you are going to make. And as such, as you see the temperature drop, the car will get faster, especially on turbo vehicles. Next thing is the altitude and the density altitude. So if you try to drive your car fast up on a high mountain or in certain countries where they're well above sea level, the car is always going to be slower than if it was at sea level. We've got other things to take into consideration as well, like humidity, and we've got wind. So if you try to do a run against the wind, of course it's going to be slower. If you've got the wind blowing from behind, then of course it's going to be faster. So what you may find is that on average, you're running, say, a 5.8, but in perfect conditions, you could run a 5.4. So that's something that makes a huge, huge difference. So you can now pick and choose when you're going to go out and run the car. Let's talk about what you can do to get the best times. Let's get into the fun stuff. How can you get the best run from your car? So before you're even out doing your run, where you decide to put your Draggy could make the difference between you having low sats and a good connection. I've actually gone as far as taping a Draggy unit to the outside of the car when the weather's been cloudy and as such. But what I normally find is that the back windows work pretty well. If I put it on the windscreen, it can be touch or go. I have done magnetic mounts on the dash. I've had it up on the windscreen, and I can find that sometimes I have issues in lots of different cars. But if I go put it on one of the side windows on like the passenger window as such, then I normally find that I have a much better connection. If you do a great run and then you look and you've got low sats, it's really annoying because the run is invalid. Next, you need to do it on a roughly flat bit of road. If you do it slightly inclined, then of course the car is going to be slower. And if you do it down a slight decline, it is going to be a little bit faster, but there is a cut-off point of 1% each way. So if you go more than 1% decline, it will be an invalid run again. So that's the basics on where you want to be doing your runs. And of course, you want to be doing it somewhere where it's legal for you to do it as well. Don't just be ripping it around the M25. If you're at a race event or you're going down the Autobahn, then that's going to be a much safer place to do it. So all that covered, let's get into the tips and tricks of what I'm actually doing when I'm doing my runs. Of course, have the best fuel you can in your car. Make sure that your oil's where it should be. Make sure that the vehicle is warmed up correctly, and make sure things like your tyre pressures and the amount of tyre tread that you've got is all okay. When it comes to doing that run, I tend to like to cruise at 60, 70 mile an hour because I'm watching my intake temps. The lower I can get those intake temps, the faster my run's going to be. And as such, if you try to do back-to-back runs, the car's just going to get slower and slower and slower because intake temps, cylinder temps and exhaust gas temps are all going up. I normally find that after about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on what the weather's like, those temperatures tend to come back down again and you're ready to do another pull. So if you're trying to do it back to back, you're not going to get anywhere. The other big difference that we tend to see is gear selection and the starting speed. So when I do a 100 to 200 run, or in UK language of mile per hour, 62 to 124 mile an hour, I tend to start at 40. I've seen a lot of people starting literally at 60 mile an hour, but as you put your foot down, you then got to build boost. So what you'll find is that that first part of the run is actually quite laggy. And as such, if you decide to start from like 0 or 10 miles an hour, you can also find that the run is slower because by the time you get up to 60, you've generated more heat again. So the sweet spot for me tends to be about 40, 45 mile an hour. It gives me enough to come up on boost, but without me really generating much heat. A bit of advice that is not for everyone, but when I do these runs to get the best times, I have traction fully off. Even if your traction light is not flashing up at you as you're changing gear, you are going to find that there is small degrees of torque intervention and it's pulling power out. If your TC is fully off, you're going to be putting more power down to the wheels. But of course, you need to make sure that you're staying safe. And if you've got a high-powered rear-wheel drive car like that one there, you may find there's a lot of conditions where you can't get a good pull. And that can be like part of the struggle with a rear-wheel drive car. You want it to be as cold as possible so that you can get the fastest runs. But once it gets past a certain temperature, you just get a load of wheel spin and then it's nearly impossible to actually do them. So we know we need the traction off. We're starting around 40 miles an hour. What else is there to consider? Well, actually when you're going to change gear and what gear you're going to start in. So for these cars here, when I do the runs, I like to start from third gear. You can start from second gear, but you've got more chance of spinning. And then literally as the run starts, you've got a gear change as well. So I actually prefer just to start in third and pull the whole way through. The other thing that can make a huge difference on cars is the point at which you change gear. Most of the time, especially on BMWs, what you're going to find is that as you get up to the highest RPM, the power falls back off. So a lot of the time, by you short shifting by 300-400 RPM, you can pick up a couple of tenths of a second. That is a big trick that I use, and it's actually finding out where is the best point to change gear on each car. Now, you may find that as you go from third to fourth, or you go from fourth to fifth, because they've got different ratios, you might actually want to change gear at a different RPM. And if you've done something like fit hybrid turbos, you may find that that efficiency range has been moved, and the car may find that it takes a little bit longer to come up on boost, but it actually holds the power further through the RPM. So having a play with at the exact point which you're changing gear can make a big difference. Now, it's really easy just to put it in auto mode and let it do its own thing, but if you can get pretty sharp with the gear changes and get used to when to change gear correctly, you can find that can make the difference between winning or losing a race. The way that I start the runs in these cars is I have it set to manual mode and I have it in S3. I put my foot down in third gear, and as I get halfway through the RPM range, I flick the gear stick over and then I'm in drive mode. Now, if you've got all your RPM set up perfectly as I have, then you can find it, you can rely on that auto mode to punch you through the rest of the gears. If you haven't got them set up for how you like, then you're better off having it in the manual mode as I was talking about in the last clip. That is my top Draggy tips. Now you can get out there, you can test your car, you're going to know what sort of things are making a difference, you can know how you can drive your car in the fastest way to get the best performance. And just remember, what's best for a Draggy run is not how you would do a roll race or how you would be acting if you're at a quarter-mile event, if you're doing them rolling runs. I've done around 1,500 Draggy runs on just 100 to 200 alone now. I've been doing it for ages, and I really like to compare a car, not just on the dyno, but out on the road so that I can see the difference between stock, stage 1, stage 2, and I get a real life performance difference that I can see in black and white. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, subscribe.